Thanks for joining me today as we use an ink blending technique plus some embossing folders with pigment ink to create this beautiful card. Plus, I have a second bonus card we'll create at the end using similar techniques. I'm Jen and you are along with me on my Jentastic journey where I create content around semi-retirement, pet health, RV travels, and of course card crafting. So let's get to today's project. We are going to use Distress Oxides today. They are great inks for blending and they are water reactive, so they will create fun effects with water. I love these 6 colors that we'll be using today. For our first card, we'll be using these 3 Distress Oxide inks in shades of Salty Ocean, Peacock Feathers, and Seedless Preserves in this beautiful flowery embossing folder. For our second card, we'll be using these 3 Distress Oxide inks in shades of Picked Raspberry, Wild Honey, and Abandoned Coral, plus this fun geometric circle embossing folder. We will start with an A6 white cardstock base. I'll add removable tape on the back to prevent slipping, and I'm using cardstock instead of scrap paper as we will be using the dabbed off ink later in the project. Now for the ink blending technique. If you want this to look very soft, buttery, and well blended, it takes a light feathery touch. A nicer watercolor type paper helps, plus it takes a lot of patience, and I just don't have that in me. Luckily in this project we want it to kind of look messy, so I'm just blending some of each ink color with some more concentration in the centers of the color patches and a little blending up to the other color. You want to make sure that you use colors that complement one another, like this light blue and pink make a lavender when blended, but the pink and teal may make more of a yucky brownish color, so we'll want to keep that in mind when blending colors. This ink blender tool has Velcro on the tops, so you can pop off each top, like I do here, to go back and retouch some spots. I keep one top for each color of each of my inks so that I can reuse the tops when I use those inks. Great to make sure that we can reuse some of our tools. Next, we will use this Hero Hues pigment ink in Unicorn White. We'll press the pigment ink onto the embossing folder with a light touch and ensure we have good coverage, but not so much that it gets into the deeper inset parts. We use the embossing folder side with the background depressed and petals popped up. Then I spritz it with some water as the ink is water reactive, so it creates a watery look and also helps the cardstock stay pliable as it's embossed. We run it through the Off-Nova die cutting and embossing machine to create this. I easily clean pigment ink from the embossing folder with water and a crafting chamois. Next, I'll trim down the embossing background paper to the size of the embossing folder so we only see the embossed part. With the smaller embossing folders, it will leave the edges of your oversized paper flat and unembossed, so we just trim that part off. Now back to the cardstock we used earlier with the inked off areas that we'll use to die cut out this layering flower that we'll use for the focus image of this card. Layered dies are so cool once assembled together. I'll match up each layer with a colored patch. Once we die cut out each of these, we'll be able to build this gorgeous flower, and it'll have tons of coordinating color plus a 3D look jumping off the card at us. I'll tape down each layer of the flower onto the various colors with removable tape. Then I'll just trim down the paper so I can die cut these out all at once. I'll push out the die cuts with this tweezer tool so that we can begin to assemble the flower. At the last second, I added a black piece to the largest flower petal just to create a shadow, so it sets it apart from the colors of the embossed background paper. Now let's assemble the flower. Sometimes it's hard to figure out which piece goes where, but I guess we can make it whatever we want, right? That's the beauty of this. Then as I started to assemble this, I felt like there was too much pink in those smaller layers. I decided to add some blue ink to it from the dauber we used earlier to make it a little lavender in color. I'll glue the flowers together with this Barely Art precision glue. It has a great tip for very precise gluing, and it's fast drying and doesn't leave a shine or stain if you overglue, and it seeps out from under your image. I love that about it. Okay, let's pop this up with some foam tape, and I'm using titanium scissors that don't get sticky. I've even labeled it to remind myself to use these to cut foam tape and other sticky items. The sticky stuff wipes right off these scissors. I use lots of foam tape to ensure our flower petals don't get crushed in the mailing process. and then to get all these little teeny pieces of the backing off. I'm so excited to use this beautiful die cut that I purchased already pre-cut. It will be the base of the flower. It's delicate, but my Barely Art precision glue will just add a touch of glue to some parts so it can still flutter a bit. Then I'll add the layered flower on top. It's beautiful, I like it. Next, for sentiment, I like these clean sentiment strips that many card crafting companies make, but instead of purchasing them, I just print some of my most used sayings using my printer onto this cardstock. This thank you sentiment is nice, but I think it needs a border so it doesn't blend in so much with the white stem. I like things to pop. So I cut out a little piece of black cardstock. It gives it just that little something, right? Okay, we'll cut it out. And then we'll pop some foam tape onto it so it sets it out from the white stem, and the black background is a perfect complement with the sentiment and the black flower petal shadow. Now to pop it onto some black paper to create a border, we'll glue it down so that it sets nice. Then we'll cut it down a bit to get an equal border around the card front. Okay, we're finished with card number 1. I like the dimension, the fun colors on our messy background, plus the pop of black and white throughout. Let me know what you think in the comments. For the next card, we'll use a similar technique, but I'm going to show you how to create some illusion to make an even simpler card. And we'll breeze through this since you already know the basics. No cardstock is needed as we ink blend, as there will be no flower or main image. We'll use these 3 warm, vibrant colors for the Distress Oxide Inks, and we will blend them like we did earlier. I guess I like to work in 3s. I don't know what that says about me. These are pretty colors, aren't they? Next, instead of using white pigment ink, we'll use black VersaFine pigment ink on our embossing folder. We'll use this fun geometric circle embossing folder. We'll run it through, then since pigment ink is a wetter ink, we'll dry this with a heat gun so it's not to smear it. We'll add this big celebrate sentiment instead of an image. It will fit perfectly across the background. I'll then trim it. Then we'll use a white scrap piece of paper for the word celebrate, which is a part of a 2-part die set, but I want it to pop, so I'll swipe 2 of the inks across the white scrap to make a 2-toned look. Then I'll die cut it out, add some black paper for the second half of the die set. We'll glue it together and create this bright, bold sentiment. Next, I'll measure the paper and cut it into 3 equal pieces that will create the type of illusion I mentioned earlier. Then we'll leave a little space between each piece and run some double-sided tape along the 3 pieces. It's best to assemble the top and bottom pieces first, so the middle one you can just adjust to get equal spacing. The tape allows for a bit of movement until you firmly press it down. Let's trim the borders so that they're symmetric. Pop this bold sentiment with some foam tape for even more dimension. Now for a little bling, we add some gem embellishments. I usually add them in odd numbers and in different sizes if I have it, so we'll put 5 on this one. Then for the first card, let's try 3 of these teal colored gems for some bling. I want to use some of the leftover background scraps in those lovely colors for the insides of the cards. It just ties it all together. So I want to place the thin pieces diagonally at the corners of the card base. I try and stay clear of the bottom right corner as I usually sign my cards there. I'll glue them and then trim the edges with some scissors. What do you think of the inside? Simple and easy, right? Okay, the second card is complete with a similar but very different look. Let me know which of these was your favorite design in the comments. I truly enjoyed crafting with you today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe for weekly card crafting and other fun content while we travel together on this fantastic journey. If you have a card crafting technique that you'd like to see, let me know in the comments. I look forward to crafting with you in the next week. See you then!